the outcome of this speech. So let's get some reaction here from Republican Representative from Iowa, Steve King. In some ways, Representative, thanks for coming on New Day.
Thanks for having me on, Chris.
You are a little bit of the face of the resistance going into tonight. When you hear that the president says, I couldn't get $9 done with your help, I'm going to go to $10 and I'm going to do it myself, and I hope that will incentivize you and members of your party to come along with me and do the right thing for workers. Does this provide incentive to you?
Provides incentive to step up and defend the Constitution. This is the president who is a former adjunct professor of teaching constitutional law at the University of Chicago. He knows better. And he gave a speech at a high school here in Washington, D.C. a couple of years ago that made it clear to them that he knows better. He has limitations. He's Article I. He's the executive branch of government. His job is to keep his oath of office and take care that the laws be faithfully executed. It's Congress's job to pass the laws. He knows that, and we need to take our oath seriously and defend the Constitution here in Congress.
So are you saying that his using an executive order to extend to federal contract workers is an abuse of power?
I think that it's a constitutional violation. We have a minimum wage. Congress has set it. For the president to simply declare, I'm going to change this law that Congress has passed is unconstitutional. He's outside the bounds of his Article II limitations. And I think that goes to court. And he knows that it takes a couple of years to get this thing to where it can actually have any effect. And he's going to run it that way. This threat that the president's going to run the government with an ink pen and executive orders. We've never had a president with that level of audacity and that level of contempt for his own oath of office.
Well, Bill Clinton signed a lot more executive orders than President Obama has, but if you want to stay with your line of reasoning, it could be a little bit of a dangerous game. How invested are you in this, Representative? Because if he really is abusing his constitutional powers, some would say that's grounds for action against the president, maybe even an impeachable offense. Is that what you're saying?
You know, I've stayed away from that word, although it does come to me out in the streets of America consistently. I think instead this Congress should lay out the violations that the president's had, and they many. It goes through the immigration piece, No Child Left Behind, welfare to work. Many of those components, Obamacare itself is probably the clearest one, when the president extended the employer mandate for a year. It's unconstitutional because the law says that the employer mandate shall commence in each month after December of 2013. And so we need to lay that all out. I think we should bring a resolution to the floor and say so and restrain this president from his extra constitutional behavior.
So to be very clear, you believe that the best way for you to do your job right now is to basically resist President Obama every way you can?
Well, when somebody asked me the other day, what do you agree with the president on? And I just turned that back around and said, what does he agree with me on? I don't think he's very bipartisan. He's the most leftist president we've ever seen. And now he's waving his ink pen at us saying, Congress, you shall conform. But in fact, when the president issued his order that extended the employer mandate, and Congress said, we're going to pass legislation to conform to your unconstitutional activity, he said, if it gets to my desk, I will veto it. He doesn't even want Congress to conform to his extra constitutional activity.
Now, on the minimum wage, though, you know a lot of members of your party are in favor of raising the minimum wage. They understand that there is something troubling about the fact that our minimum wage keeps someone below the poverty line. I'm sure you can recognize that, right?
I've been there.
And there's just something about it that's almost visceral. It's not even political, that when our set minimum wage keeps someone below the line of poverty, you have a problem. Agreed?
Well, I would say this, that it's a low percentage of people that work under minimum wage. It is entry level.
It's a growing number.
But it's entry level. It teaches a work ethic. And here's the other side of that equation.
That's the assumption that it's all young kids. It's only 20% teenagers these days, Congressman. You know this stuff. You know a lot of families are getting by 46% of their family income, minimum wage income.
Here's the other side of that equation, though. Is wherever you raise the minimum wage, you necessarily cost jobs, because some employers will decide, I can't afford that any longer. We watched that change the economic climate. You can't drive into a gas station any longer and get someone that'll wash your windshield, check your oil, and fill your tank. That's what happens when you do this. The minimum wage is the government interfering in between the relationship between the employer and the employee. And in the end...
So you think there should be no minimum wage?
I think that what we should have done is left the minimum wage alone and just let it drift away and let the economy grow the way that it shall.
Some people haven't gotten, in real dollars, adjusted inflation, a raise in 20 years. I mean, how can you believe that you're going to support the American dream when families are getting stifled that way?
Because I have been an employee. I've worked at minimum wage. I've been an employer for 28 years. We've never paid minimum wage. We've always paid more than that. You want to bid for the best employees that you can get, and you want to sustain them over a long period of time because you're invested in their skill levels. And if you let people, if you don't have that incentive for people to move up, when they go in and take a minimum wage job, they look out and they think, I need to make more money, I need to develop my skills, I'm going to have to either market those skills to some other employer, go back and get an education. If you can legislate a minimum wage, and this Congress can decide what that number should be, then you could also, by the same logic, legislate a living wage. And if you can legislate a living wage, you could also legislate prosperity. Someplace up that scale, people drop off. They drop off all the way up that scale. I'd rather have more Americans working, not less. There are 100 million Americans today of working age who are simply not in the workforce. We need to get them working. Raising the minimum wage goes backwards on us on that task.
But you are aware going into tonight's speech that at least half of your party and certainly a majority of the American people believe that extending unemployment benefits, dealing with the minimum wage are important to them. You do know that, right?
What I know is the president will give a speech that's designed to divide Republicans against each other and unify Democrats against Republicans. That he will do. He sent us that signal from Hawaii when he was on his Christmas vacation, chastised Congress for leaving town to go see our families over Christmas, and then he gave the minimum wage, extend unemployment benefits, and a comprehensive immigration reform speech. All of that. Those are the three items that I can think of that unify Democrats and divide Republicans. It is clear political strategy that the president has chosen these items to drive for the 2014 legislative agenda.
At the end of the day, it's got to be about compromise, though, doesn't it, Representative? I mean, that's what the dome represents. You're all there in it together. You got to find a way to make it work.
Well, I'd say to the president, come our way. Show us what you're willing to do. Come across the aisle and listen carefully, because the president is going to have to draw a fine line here. He's going to want to spend some time beating up on Republicans, being critical of Republicans, and at the same time, he needs Republican cooperation because the House is the blocking agent for the president's agenda.
That's certainly been the case, and we know that you have your reservations. Hopefully you can find a way forward because Americans need it. Representative King, appreciate you taking the opportunity as always.
Thanks for having me on this morning, Chris.
All right.